All right, so yesterday we got our tweets into the database, and now I'd like to get our users into the database. So what I'm going to do is notice here we're still using our own little user class. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a model user class. And as I mentioned yesterday, there already is a user class that Laravel provides, and we're going to use that a little bit later. But for right now, we're going to ignore it. It looks like I did create a user class already, so I guess I did do that yesterday. So just to refresh, to make the user, I would have done PHP. Oh, it's right there. It's literally the last command I ran. PHP artisan make model models / user, and this should error because it already exists. Yeah, model already exists. So I've created the user, but now I want to hook it up. So you can see here I'm still using this user class that's really an empty class that I defined. So I can go use app models user, and if I save that and I refresh, I should get an error, and that says cannot declare app controller's user because the name is already in use. So what's happening here is I've started using the name user, and then I try and define a class called user. And you can't have two classes of the same name in a file. I could have used an alias here. I could have gone as my user, and this would have gotten me around it. But really, I actually want to use this model user as my user class. So I'm going to just get rid of this class user. And I was hoping, oh, that's white space. So now this should, again, just work. But now the user down here, the Mr. Bean, as well as my other users, are now models, which means we can start to put them into the database. So let's look at what we're doing with Get Mr. Bean. And you'll see here that there's a number of properties here that I don't think I've got in my database yet. So let me look at my database. And if I look at my users table, right, I just have email, name, and image. So I'm going to start by adding a few more columns to my table. I'm going to say don't save. Just to get back there, clearing off some of these tabs. I go to users, and then I go to the little wrench icon. That brings me up to edit the table. So let me see what I've got here. So I've got a name, handle, description, and website. So we'll start with that. So I already have the name, but I'll add the handle. Varchar, I'm going to say it can be null. I'm not going to worry as much about the not null for some of these. So I've got a handle, then a description. Description. Now, a description could be long. Well, okay, I'm going to set it to be 255. That they shouldn't go too long and make too long a description. Then we've got website and joined. So website is going to be, again, 255. Joined is going to be a date. So I'll make that a date time. And what else we've got? Now, some of these other ones, like tweet count, following, followers, likes, moments, those are all what I consider generated values. They're not, doesn't really make sense to store them, so I'm going to ignore them for now. Or maybe not quite ignore them, but I'm going to avoid them. I already have the image because I made that yesterday. So it looks like I've got most of the properties, except for these generated ones, on my user. So I can now apply, and sorry? The question is, did I send any of the NNs? And so not null basically means that the field is required. And I'm actually going to say that these fields are not required. So you can have a user that may or may not, depending on your business case, that may or may not make sense, but I'm going to go with that for now. So I'm going to apply. I successfully executed that in my database. So now if I look at my users table, you can see that I now have these additional 4 columns. So now I've got a user Bob. Actually, I'm going to change the name back to Bob. Otherwise, I'll get confused. And let's say the handle is @Bob. The description, this is Bob's feed. The website will be bob.com. And the joined is a date, so I'm going to say Bob joined in 2016 on the 1st of January. So I'll apply that. So here I'm using an update SQL statement. I'm going to hit apply. And so now I've got Bob. So I'm going to create one other user. That'll be Jane at email.com. Jane. I'll worry about the image in a moment. At Jane. This is Jane's feed. Jane.com. And Jane is an early adopter, so she joined Twitter in 2011. I'll apply that. And that was an insert. I probably want an image for Jane, so I'm going to just grab one of these images from one of these users that I had down here. And put that in. And you would do this for each of your users. Oops, there's nothing in there. Should work now. Okay, so now I've got 2 users in the database. I've got Bob and I've got Jane. So now, when I get Mr. Bean, I want to return a user from, instead of newing up a user, I want to return that from the database. Now in this case, I don't want to get all users. I want to get a specific user. So in this case, there's another function we can use that uses the double colon, which is user find. And that's going to get a single user with the given ID. So this is going to get the user with ID 1. And so now all of the name, the handle, the description, the website, the joined, and the image are all coming from the database. I'm leaving these guys still in here because they're going to be calculated, and so I'm going to leave them for now. The other thing is this isn't really Mr. Bean anymore, so I'm just going to call this primary user. I'm going to call this get primary user. And lastly, call this get primary user. So let's see what happens now when I refresh. And it looks like now all my tweets are coming from Bob. And the information, this is Bob's feed, bob.com, joined. I probably could format this date. So in order to format the date, I would go to my user model. And you recall that we had that special public dates property, and this time I'm going to say that joined, because that's the name of the column, the date column, is a date. So lastly, when I refresh, I still get that, but I want to go to my welcome, and I want to look for where I'm putting out the joined. I should be able to now go format. I'm just going to say what year they joined in. So now it says joined 2016. I probably could put the month as well. So joined January 2016. So I'm able to do this format because I added joined, which is my date column, to the dates property of my object. Okay. And if I come in here to my tweets controller and I go to primary user and I say instead of user 1, I go user 2, I should now see Jane. Now it says this is Jane's feed, but Jane doesn't actually have any tweets, and we would want, well, maybe I'll show you this now as well, is that we would want to see all of Jane's tweets, not Bob's tweets here. Now Jane doesn't have any tweets, so when we look at Jane, it should be an empty list. So how do we get Jane's tweets? So here we were passing in the primary user and we're going get tweets. Well, if we look at get tweets here, we're just getting all the tweets in the whole system. So how would we get the tweets that are just for, and I'm going to change this to primary user. And did I change that up here? I'm going to change every place where I have Mr. Bean, I'm changing it to primary user. So to get the tweets for just the primary user, what I can do is instead of saying all, I can create a where clause. So I can go where, and then I can say user ID is primary user ID. So that's basically saying, get me all the tweets. We're creating a where clause where the user ID is equal to the primary user's ID. And then to finish this off, I go get. So this is called building a query. So this is kind of like building an SQL statement, but it's in a very safe way. This is one of the ways in which we avoid SQL injection attacks, is that you cannot inject malicious SQL into this where clause. So we're saying get the user whose primary, the tweets for where the user ID is equal to the primary user's ID, get them, and then return those tweets. So now if I refresh, Jane has no tweets. So we could go and create a tweet or modify one of the tweets. So if I go to my tweets table, I'm just going to change this tweet here to be user ID 2, so it's Jane's tweet. So Jane has one tweet. And then if I go back and I change my get primary user to get user 1, so now user 1 should have 3 tweets because I gave one of them to Jane. So Bob has now 3 tweets. Okay. So I'm going to pause there, but what I would like you to do now is to make sure that your primary user is coming from the database. You can continue to fake out these 5 columns. I'd also like you, for these other users that are over here in the left hand, is to also perhaps use a user : all to get all the users and display them here. Okay. And also to have your tweets be filtered so that you're only showing the tweets for the, right now it's just hard-coded. Here, where do we get the primary user? Right now we're hard-coding the user, but you could also, sort of a hint for the future is that what we'll have is request, this is pseudocode, but logged in user ID, and this might be actually session or something like that, so that once you're logged in, you're saying just my primary user is my logged in user. We're not quite there yet. This isn't real code, so we're going to keep it with hard-coded, but that's where we're going, is that we're going to be able to show the logged in user's tweets or any user's tweets. So say you go to, another thing we could do is we could add a, we want to be able to go to the handle of a user. So if I go to real Donald Trump, maybe not real Donald Trump. Let's go to Mr. Bean. That it actually shows me Mr. Bean's feed and not somebody else's. So that's some of where we're going with this. Okay.